Good morning, everyone. I am Professor Eunice Seekoe, a Deputy Vice-Chancellor teaching Learning and Community Engagement at Sefako Makgatho Health Sciences University. I am the chairperson of this session. I want to welcome you to this breakout session, number 12, with a theme of monitoring and evaluation of university engagement role. Without any waste of time, I would like to allow our first speaker, Dr. Vathiswa Papu-Zamxaka, to introduce this session. Dr. Vathiswa, she is a Deputy Vice-Chancellor at Tshwane University of Technology. She's responsible for research, innovation, and engagement. And her full bio is on the prospectus. You can read about it. And let me hand over to you, Dr. Vathiswa.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairperson. Dear colleagues, distinguished delegates of the conference, the speakers, good morning. I will take only 5 minutes or less so that we can have enough time for the deliberations by our speakers. Just to introduce the topic. Ladies and gentlemen, community engagement is one of the primary responsibilities of universities together with research as well as teaching and learning, as we know. There has been remarkable work done around unpacking and conceptualizing the notion of community engagement over the past 2 decades. Madam Chairperson, from grappling with the conceptual framework to building the field for practice, it can be generally accepted that community engagement to a certain extent denotes a process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people associated to the university, either by geographical proximity, special interests, or similar situations to address issues affecting their well-being. From the policy perspective, the Higher Education Act 101 of 1997, the National Plan on Higher Education, and the White Paper for Post-School Education and Training of 2013 recognize community engagement as one of the 3 core functions of universities. This reaffirms that community engagement is cast as one of the key pillars to drive socio-economic development in society and addressing the injustices of the past. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, community engagement as one of the core functions of the university has been profoundly affected, Madam Chair and the colleagues. This calls for institutions to rethink their monitoring and evaluation role to reinforce the priority of community engagement. Looking at the monitoring and evaluation itself of community engagement within our universities, colleagues, notwithstanding attempts by various scholars and the fact that policy positions community engagement at the core of universities' responsibilities, monitoring and evaluation of the university community engagement role remains a hurdle in many institutions. According to a survey by Favesh and Nkonki-Mandleni in 2013, Madam Chair, which was cited on the Council on Higher Education report in 2016, it indicates that one of the barriers institutions experience is inadequate development of mechanisms to evaluate the quality of community engagement at institutional level. Hall in 2020, in his report, which is entitled Community Engagement in South African Higher Education, indicates that there are no articulated standards or objectives with clear indicators against which to monitor progress, measure impact, and evaluate effectiveness of community engagement activities at many of our universities. This is of concern, Madam Chair. With reference to a survey conducted by CHE in 2013, with a response rate of 80% from universities in South Africa to determine the extent to which community engagement is institutionalized and embedded in institutional functions. The survey responses revealed that there is a continued use of very different conceptual frameworks that guide community engagement at institutional level. And these require us to look very strongly at them. It is of concern that there is indeed different conceptual frameworks. Most importantly, The survey revealed high levels of dissatisfaction with regard to the lack of national policies to provide an enabling environment for expanding and recognizing community engagement across the sector. These problems feed into the misconceptions surrounding the monitoring and evaluation of the university committee and engagement roles. There is a need, therefore, to strengthen the university's capacity to monitor and evaluate community engagement initiatives by forging links with international networks and organizations already working on this, to collaborate further with them around the development of strategies for assessing and recognizing and engage scholarship. There is also a growing need, Madam Chair, to review existing policy, to strengthen policy framework to make path for monitoring and evaluation of institutional community engagement initiatives. As I close, in this session, we will be deliberating on and unpacking the monitoring and evaluation of the university committee and engagement role. And we're looking forward to hear our speakers unpacking this topic of high importance further. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Papu, for a very eloquent speech and really making us aware of the role that the university needs to play to make sure that community engagement is positioned the way it's supposed to be. I'm not going to give you an opportunity to the audience to ask you questions. We don't have much time, but I think they are now prepared and they are willing to go forward. So I will introduce speaker number 2, Professor Vhonani Netshandama. She's the Director of Community Engagement at the University of Venda. Her full bio is also on the prospectus, so I'm not going to go into it. And I will hand over to you, Professor Vhonani.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a privilege to be in this session. I would like to, of course, start by appreciating the opportunity that we got this morning. It is really an indication that there is the intention for us to come together in figuring things out. I am excited by the introductory remarks of Professor Papu, and I'm also excited that within this session, I have colleagues that are going to unpack the details and the distinct features of what has been happening as embraced by Prof. Papu's introduction. And so I located my talk really as an opening act of my 2 colleagues who I really work with closely within the Forum for Community Engagement in Higher Education, USAf. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I would therefore go straight to my reflections by contextualizing the talk. And within this, I'm actually just going to put in one place the lessons that we've had in the past 3 days, which says, even as there was issues and discussions and conversations of appreciation in this space of community engagement as well, we have traveled the long journey. There are pockets of excellence, which I'm regarding as opportunities. The current practices are largely gratifying. We've had institutional audits that in one way or another embraced community engagement, monitoring and evaluation. And so I also would want to perhaps also talk about the fact that the journey did not really come without challenges. There are historical baggages that we still carry into community engagement, monitoring and evaluation as well. And so I hope that my presentation would really be talking about that in smaller ways to provoke some reflections and conversations in the list. I want to also just spend a minute or less on recognition of the fact that while we may have had a slow, steady uphill journey, we also could say that at this moment there are policies and guidelines to guide community engagement in almost all institutions. And I had colleagues talking about the recognition and rewards and awarding the excellence, although, you know, to a lesser extent, but we are grateful that as a country, we are also playing in international space in terms of such awards. And so I thought I should appreciate that. Quickly, I'm just going to flash this. This is the definition that appear on the institutional review framework. And I'm fleshing it out because it will, I will talk about it at some point as a point of reflection. The part that I am going to use to unpack really as a storyteller would do is for us to reflect on to what extent have we applied the logic model to the deliverables. And I want to probably stop a bit more because I want to indicate that I listened carefully during the conversations of these 3 days. But in almost all the reference material that have been shared and also in literature, there is a consensus that community engagement is an integral part or should be an integral part of teaching and learning and innovation and research. And so I wanted to use this to say to what extent, therefore, are we at least deliberating or attempting to apply that principle in the monitoring and evaluation. You will notice that I didn't want to dwell much on the concept definitions and so forth, but rather to be pragmatic and talk about issues that we are grappling with as indicated by Professor Papu. And so I'm going to make the first argument that monitoring and evaluation couldn't have happened otherwise. As we were grappling with the integration, so did we with the evaluation. So all the reports that perhaps were listed I would like to contextualize them to say that I'm inviting some more reflections in terms of how have we done and how might we do better. You would be surprised that I put assumption, but I also put humility because I wanted to remind myself in not forgetting to put on this conversation something that I had as well very often, even in the past 3 days, about the tendency to know that the forms of knowledge that we are navigating in are not necessarily humble to the reality that the knowledge forms have always been diversified, and therefore the need for disrupting that dominance by being humble to that reality is also important in contextualizing the monitoring and evaluation. I want to also just quickly acknowledge that even as we understand that we haven't been doing well enough, let me put it that way, in evaluating and monitoring, it was because as well of the lack of realization or the will to act in terms of borrowing from other forms of measurements. And I wanted to at least acknowledge that in this presentation, I'm going to focus on the social impact that is difficult or has been difficult because I would say the nature of the engagement of the core business. And so I want just to put it at the back of our minds that even as we monitor and evaluate, there are possibilities or opportunities to borrow from those that specialize in it and bring it to the conversations. In the process of monitoring community engagement, the process is important, as I will also just quickly list towards the end, but I know my two colleagues are going to unpack that in detail. And so I want to put it on the table that this area of monitoring and evaluating the process has been largely difficult because of also the systemic and structural arrangements in universities. We can talk more about that later, but the process of engagement itself is participative, it's adaptive, and there are no blueprints, clear-cut, parameters to predetermine if you are truly going to measure that. That should be then the primary principle or lens to which that should be looked at. The relatability of the outcomes I want to put on the table that hasn't been in the interest of community engagement goals, I may say, in the sense that we measured ourselves in our own predetermined sets of criteria, and so no wonder why it would be difficult for anybody to look at the impact, because then the impact is looked at outside of us, if I may say. So I want to quickly also just make suggestive statements, really, if nothing else, to provoke the discussion moving forward. I've already touched on the problematic of us always evaluating ourselves on our own set of criteria, but I also want to indicate that if we want to monitor and evaluate community engagement, and at the same time we're saying it's a critical, integral part of what we do when we teach and when we learn and when we research, then maybe we should be looking at a cross-sectional form of engagement that I would say we don't know much, we don't know how to do, as reflected in those reports. And here are the challenges. We operate in TAFs, but community engagement out there are no disciplines. And I would say we create boxes and monitoring mechanisms that are not friendly towards impact. Currently, projects evaluate themselves. In other words, in many institutions, and I'm still to learn about those that have done well, but those that we interact within the forum, most of us, the engagement evaluation really places itself within the project. So a researcher would have a project, and the evaluation of that project then become the evaluation of engagement. And yes, we assume that that researcher knows it well, knows the indicators and. But I'm questioning, I'm putting in a provocative way as well, whether or not we have considered integrating the evaluation at institutional level. And my last slide will talk to that. And of course, I'm advocating for the voices of the communities within the evaluation itself, which is something that is hard to do if we are still very protective and gatekeeping and not welcoming to our communities. And so I want to also acknowledge, and this is why I put this criterion that we used many years ago, which I thought was a big push to where we are today. I wanted to appreciate that perhaps if one look at today's ways in which the evaluation is taking place, there is that standard on engagement and the questions about how we are engaging, the respect and the ethics, that perhaps I should also acknowledge in terms of helping the institutions, or helping us to begin to reflect on that. But I want to now quickly move to this unlearning and framing that I hope I have made a case why it has to be looked that way. Here, the wordy paragraph is just for me to remind myself to acknowledge the fact that actually, if we were to be doing everything right, the reflexivity and the reflective nature of community engagement would be helpful to the way in which we monitor and evaluate. And so using an ecosystemic approach, And in trying to relearn the ways in which the silo ways in which the M&E is also conceptualized or applied, at least to an extent that I'm aware of, is to look at participatory evaluation and looking at how do we then bring in communities in earnest in those evaluations. And perhaps this doesn't mean anything if one doesn't try to unpack it by giving a few examples. And I'm coming to the end of my presentation, really. But I want to stand in this slide because I wanted to give an example in making some uncomfortable statements about perhaps using research as an example. When we do research, when we supervise research of even inducting our students on the research in higher education frame, the input is expected to also, at least in the list, integrate that as my colleagues. I listened to very informative, insightful presentation from my esteemed colleagues in the past who are researchers and participatory in the past 3 days. But I want to put it on this conversation table that perhaps we have not thought or still do not have the will to make that part of our monitoring. When a student comes to the university, we already expect that the student has some kind of a topic and knows what he's supposed to be doing and so forth and so forth. But then the question that I'm now putting to this conversation is, couldn't we then in our unlearning integrate?
Prof?
Yes.
We're even taking time for your questions now.
Oh, okay. So I am closing by just going to put this one line that says, have we thought about integrating the principles and the values and the expectations of engagement, community engagement, even in the way we are inducting and conducting the process of monitoring and evaluation of all the activities, including research. And I wanted to give an example that how many of our university have put that as a criteria that the engagement has to be visible before the approval. And in that, I would like to thank you for the opportunity and hoping that there will still be time, even if it's in the chat, for us to engage on these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for that insightful presentation. You really reminded us about the importance of logic in evaluating and monitoring and evaluating community engagements, working and doing it, and also the importance of disciplines, reflexivity, and integrating M&E in our work, starting from an individual level, institutional level to the community level. I'm going to allow members to ask questions. Members, questions or comments? Yes.
There's one question in the chat that raises the issue of how do local communities input into M&E of university community engagement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I also see the next one also being How can M&E be regulated as part of management function at universities? Those are the two questions that I'm seeing. I will allow Professor Vhonani to respond. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you. Yes, no, those are exactly the questions that I'm raising, and I'm lobbying actually in a way that we should work together to begin to influence that direction where we would have an answer, because I don't know how communities at the moment are inputting on our monitoring and evaluation. And so it's a challenge that I'm actually putting on the table for all of us. Thanks.
Okay.
And yes, it should be part of the management function. If it is an integral part, or it is supposed to be an integral part, we should be able to trace that in all of our deliverables in the other core business. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof. Any more questions, comments from the floor? Okay. In the absence of comments or questions, then I will introduce speaker number 2. Thank you very much, Prof, for your presentation. I think everyone appreciated. I will introduce speaker number 2, Professor Busisiwe Nkonki-Mandleni. She's the Director of Community Engagement and Development at Mangosuthu University of Technology. Her bio is also on the prospectus. So anyone who wants to go through it can go through it and to understand clearly who she is and what role really she has played within the profession. I'm handing over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning, everyone. I'm also excited to be in this session. I hope I'm audible enough. Thank you also to Prof. Papu for a contextual and insightful introduction, which really made me think of the era that we're in currently, which is not far from which can have a bearing on delivery of community engagement in our institutions, which we should also be mindful of. So thank you very much. Now I'm going to quickly share my presentation here under the theme Monitoring and Evaluation of University Community Engagement Role. I decided to look at the impact because I felt it is important that I emphasize the aspect of impact, because when we do monitoring and evaluation, at the end of the day, we as institutions of higher learning have to make an impact. So this is how my topic goes: university community impact as means of driving transformation agenda. This is the layout of my presentation. I won't go through it for the sake of time. As a background, I just want to bring across a reminder that there are national imperatives that are there that we need to observe as universities regarding community engagement. It is the 2001 National Plan for Higher Education, which acknowledges the importance of higher education's relevance to the institution's responsiveness to regional and national priorities. And it is also the South African Transformation a white paper 1997, as well as the white paper on post-school education and training. Also, to bring us closer, the HEQC 2004 has set it as a criteria for university that community engagement should be included in the quality assurance mechanisms of higher education institutions. Therefore, the goals of institutions in higher education sector should be to comply with CEAD and to tie to the transformation agenda and the developmental objectives for the sole purpose of making an impact. So my presentation will always be touching on the impact, because we need to be far-sighted in the sense that in as much as we are in the universities carrying out community engagement activities, excited about them, but what is the impact, which is critical, impact inside the university and also outside the university premises, very, very critical. Now, coming to the status of the community engagement, as you all know, it is globally recognized. This one I've taken from Hart 2021. And at the same time, community engagement is a scholarship with the same status as that of research and teaching and learning. This has been a subject that has been very much under debate, but this is my take to say community engagement is at the same standing as the teaching and learning and research. And that is how I had to make it clear in my presentation. And also, as we all know, it has become the integral part for teaching and learning in order to make impact as a way of driving the transformation agenda. And then again, according to Hart 2021, engaged in inverted commas must take place in all the three core functions of the university, that is teaching and learning and research and service. Now, this monitoring and evaluation, therefore, is used to assess performance, relevance, effectiveness, and efficiency of community engagement in higher education institutions in the light of objectives to measure impact. So that is how we arrive at the impact. It is through monitoring and evaluation. So even with the universities, it should be the goal. It should be a medium-term and a long-term goal to realize the impact. Also, community engagement in higher education emphasizes the importance of involving diverse role players, which is very important through partnerships and collaborations as far as the civil society, government, and the industry. And what I can be sure of, as our previous speaker indicated, the universities are quite aware of their mandate. They are quite aware of the mandate of making a contribution towards making a difference in advancing the communities through community engagement. There is already some areas or pockets of excellence, as the previous speaker has indicated. Now, let's come to the positioning of the community engagement. If you can see my diagram there, we can see that community engagement is right in the middle of teaching and research and service. So in other words, it is a binding, it's a glue that binds the three together. Therefore, if we can say as higher education institutions, we monitor research, we monitor teaching, why can't we also monitor community engagement? It has to be monitored. I fully agree with that. It has to be monitored and it has to be evaluated in order to make impact.
Sorry, Prof, can I interfere you? Are you on slide mode?
I'm on slide mode now.
Oh, it is because there are also participants from YouTube are requesting that you should be on slide mode. Okay, if you are on slide mode, it's okay. Sorry for interfering. I keep on having to.
You can check on the chat if they are okay now, the way I have presented, and then you can get back to me.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. Now, why do we have to monitor and evaluate? The critical aspect is compliance, hence I put it in green. Compliance with the HEQC specifications. But we also have a social responsibility as universities. We have to have all those principles we need to adhere to: reciprocity, ethical engagement, collaboration, transformation, empowerment, to name a few, sustainability, and also scholarly engagement. And now, why do we have to evaluate? Evaluation is very important because we need, as universities or institutions of higher learning, to verify, to be verified whether we are achieving the objectives that we have set with our communities and also with our stakeholders. So if we don't do the verification, how are we going to know that we are achieving the objectives that we're setting? Feedback also is another reason for evaluation: integrity, accountability, process improvement, and also the key one is also funding, which I'm going to dwell more on in the following slides. Now, coming to the current situation in our institutions of higher learning. In as much as there are pockets of excellence, but we still have challenges. We are battling with this animal, for the lack of a better word, which is monitoring and evaluation. I made a little bit of literature search in the South African universities, in the US, and the UK, and my conclusion is that indeed there is a challenge when it comes to monitoring and evaluation. I'm not going to go through all the points just to save time, but just to explain that I have made some review and there is a challenge. According to Hart 2011, is the challenge of standardized instruments and tools. And also when myself, I was doing a literature review because I tried to get into how far are we when it comes to monitoring evaluation. And the literature is quite scanty when it comes to the evaluation part, the outcome and the impact part. The literature mostly dwells on the activities. What we did, this is what we done, that is what we do, which is not enough according to me. Now, let us look at the scope of monitoring and evaluation. When we do as universities monitoring evaluation, we have to make sure that we observe those three stages, from the conceptualization, implementation, up to the exit, in all the three domains, which is teaching and learning and research and service and outreach, in order to make an impact in order to make an impact, full stop. Now, how do we do that? I decided to get a diagram that is going to show the process that universities have to follow, which I think they are aware of. We are aware of these processes. But now, where is the problem lying? Why are we having a scanty literature, especially when it comes to impact? But anyway, I'll go through it. It's goals, objectives, activities, inputs, outputs, outcomes, as well as an impacts. And what is important in this diagram is that when it comes to monitoring, the actual monitoring, it is where now we look as to whether the set objectives for that particular engagement are being looked into, if they are not misinterpreted, and so on and so forth. And when it comes to looking at the impact is where now you look at the overall goal. As universities, we have set goals, and it has been a national imperative that when we set our goals as universities, there should be that aspect which is going to indicate that the university will be responsive. It will be a responsive university. So when you look at the impact, that is where we look now at the overall goal to check if what we're trying to achieve has been successful. Now, achieving a desired outcome at a specific date and time, employing a certain amount of resources, it means we need to, what is it that we want to change? It means we need to be very specific here. And we need to look at the targets. What targets are we having? It should be measurable, attainable, realistic, and also time-bound. These are the goals that we usually set when we, yes. Then when it comes to monitoring, remember when we do the monitoring as the universities, we bring on board our external stakeholders, and they have to be part of this throughout the stages that I showed in the earlier on, from the conceptualization up to the exit. Now, the beautiful thing or the beautiful aspect about this is that it allows the universities to come up now with the theories of change. And when we do that, it becomes a beautiful exercise that allows our universities, our communities that we're working with, to transition towards the transformation that is required for impact. So what happens when we do the monitoring thing, when we do the theories of change, what is important is that you need to be very clear about the purpose, and also need to define the goal itself. What is the extended goal? I made an example there. And also need to develop the pathways for a change. So during that moment of coming with the theories of change, that is where it allows the communities that are involved, that is the university and also the external stakeholders, to come up with the theories of change, which is I like because it brings the dignity to our institutions of higher learning, so that we do not rely on other theories and other philosophies, but we are the ones who come up with those theories and theories of change. I like this aspect very much. And then what is important also is to, while you are in the process of doing the theory of change, is to also identify priority information that is required, and also the methods of gathering it, and also how we can operationalize the outcomes, which is the indicators, and also how are we going to define the intervention and articulate the assumptions. So this is the part of the monitoring, in the sense that when we do the monitoring, we, in as much as we are looking at the activities, but at the same time, we are also developing this theory of change in order to enhance, or what you call allow for transition, for impact at the end of the day. Now, I have come up now with an example of a logical model that is usually handy when it comes to developing a theory of change, which is quite a familiar model that is used in other settings. So even with the development of the theory of change, this is just an example that I've brought to say we can follow that logical framework of looking at what are the inputs that we require, what are the activities that are there, and what are the outputs, and out of those outputs, what are the outcomes in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. In the long term, meaning which now we're looking at the actual impact itself. So when developing these theories of change, it means now we need to be mindful of the kind of resources that we are having, the human resources. How diverse is the community that is part of of this theory of change or of this exercise? How diverse is it? And at the same time, even the physical resources, where is this taking place? Is there fairness when it comes to bringing everybody on board in order to have or to undertake this activity of the theory of change? And then the activities, which is just there to increase participation. And then the outputs, it looks at the results that are brought out of that of those activities, and then the short-term outcomes, as I've indicated, long-term, medium-term, and also the long-term. And when we do that with that theory of change, we need to be mindful of the environment in which we are operating in now. Right now, we are in the COVID-19 pandemic era. At the same time, we are also in the era of social imbalances. Those are the things that we need to look into when we come with the theory, with developing the theory of change. Hence, I just made an example here of social justice. Now, when it comes to monitoring, these are the questions that we usually ask. Well, I'll just run through them for the sake of time. Is the program addressing community needs? Are community members involved in the development of the program? For conceptualization, to establish great project goals and development plan? How do members help ensure that the program or intervention is culturally sensitive? Or even political sensitive or environmental sensitive, whatever. Are community members involved in the application of theories? Does the process of the structure of meeting allow all voices to be heard and equally valued, which is very critical? Where do, for example, where do meetings take place? At what time of the day or the night? Who leads the meeting? What is the mechanism of decision making? And how are conflicts resolved? And then when it comes to the evaluation, we look now at the different levels: at student level, at the student level, academic level, and also at the community level. We need to do that in all the levels when we do the evaluation. Impact, those are the keywords that I like to see. Capacity, empowerment. When we empower communities, it means we know that there will be that sustainability in the change that has taken place in the community. Same applies with the university setting itself. Investment in the public and private sector to raise the societal well-being. It is also about holistic integration of all processes. It's also about multidisciplinarity. And as I indicated earlier on, it's also about the sustainability. I have just come here with an example, because sometimes we can talk and not practicalize it. I just took one example as how we can go about doing the monitoring and evaluation. I took one domain, which is teaching and learning, teaching and learning. Under teaching and learning, as I indicated earlier on, these are the stages that I indicated in the previous slides. Now, under stage 1, which is conceptualization, what activities are there? I'll make an example. We can, with the communities that have been identified, are diverse communities. We need to identify the module. How do we identify the module? What informs us to identify the module? Which is informed by the economic setting. I'll make an example, module on entrepreneurship. Okay. Module on entrepreneurship, it means is because it's addressing the unemployment. So it means we need inputs from the different stakeholders as to what should be part of this module. So all the activities in the conceptualization stage, they have to be involved. And what are the monitoring and evaluation indicators? Are the community needs addressed? Cultural sensitivity,
Can you conclude, Prof?
All right. We look at those indicators and also the clusters, which principle, under which indicator cluster. So aspects of inclusivity, reciprocity, and knowledge transfer. Implementation, you do the same thing or the same activity, making sure that you have your indicators such as quality assurance, materials and sharing of materials, and you also look at the principles. I also decided to bring in the CHE audit indicators, and then the same applies with exit. So that is how we make sure that if in monitoring and evaluations in the higher education institutions is taking place. As long as we do not apply these indicators, as long as we do not apply these principles of inclusivity, reciprocity, knowledge transfer, empowering, and so on and so forth, and so constructivism, that is co-creating knowledge together. And also when we reflect, it also allows us to check whether we can improve and make things better in the future. So coming to my conclusion, what are we good for? Are we embracing our mandate as higher education to transform to the transformation agenda? Are we responsive? Is also our P2M responsive? And then lastly, I can say the scholarship of engagement, and that is transformation of society through social impact, is only possible through community engagement. And so the era for engaged scholarship has finally arrived, and it is past the debates of defining it according to Hart 2021. Now, my recommendations is that as universities, we need to
conclude. The time is off now. Time is up. Thank you. Sorry about that. Because you already have questions lined up here from the audience. Let me firstly check if there are members who I don't see any hands. Any comments? It's time now for questions, comments. I don't see you have audience on the YouTube, and they submit their questions through the chat. The first one is which comes from Phumzile Dlamini. The integrated approach has its own limitations in the context of M&E. The engagement process is critical to community engagement, yet very few universities, if any, have standards or metrics to monitor the process. She further says quality assessment of community engagement are not neatly accommodated by the traditional standards that are dominant in universities. And then the next one, I think that is a comment, maybe you can respond to it. There is not linear, the community engagement is not linear, it is reiterative and messy. And then we also have another one from Mr. George Mvalo. She's thanking you for the presentation. Any particular reasons that CHE compliance seem to be emphasized more than scholarly engagement? Secondly, kindly share practical examples of what you mean by impact. And another one, anonymous, says, colleagues, good morning. The International Association of IESIS have a variety of resources to utilize. Please check out the website, it's a comment. And then we have George Makubalo. Question 1, you proposed community engagement as a glue that holds research, teaching, and service. But how can community engagement be glue when universities are disengaged from their communities in the true sense of engagement? Universities pay lip service to engaging their communities. It is difficult for universities to monitor their impact on their communities because they are disengaged. There you are. Thank you, Prof. I think you did very well. You really took us through and showed us that community engagement has to be a scholarship. It has to integrate teaching and learning, research and service. And you have also indicated that the impact of community engagement can only be realized when the needs of communities have been identified. And further than that, you took us through, you directed us to the theory of change and the logic. So thank you very much, Prof. And over to you now to answering questions.
Thank you.
I think there's another one. Sonwabo Ncelwane. People are coming up with more questions. You have opened a can of worms, Prof. The argument that community engagement is a glue is not supported by practices, reward and recognition systems, and even organizational structures of our universities. That's Sonwabo. And then George Makubalo, can institutions offer substandard education? Institutions offering substandard education make an impact on community as envisaged by community engagement. And then and Anonymous says they need additional conversation to get to standards. Okay, over to you.
It looks like I have opened a can of worms here. I'm sorry about that, everyone. Yes, I'm not sure if I took all the questions, but I'm not sure. Perhaps through your chairperson, if you may allow, before I can answer, maybe the recommendations that I was coming with, they will answer some of the questions. Okay. The first recommendation that I came up with is the openness. Let us allow ourselves as universities to be evaluated and corrected by our communities. It's really a challenge when we bring those glossy annual reports. And I always ask myself, what does the next person say about this report? So that openness is very important because it will allow us to include whether we are making an impact to the communities. As long as we close that area, then we are not sure whether we're making an impact to the communities. Partnerships, talking about the substandard education, maybe that can answer that question. When we do partnerships, let's go out of our borders and try and partner also international and see how others are doing it so that it can assist us to influence, because we are not here just to take the teaching and the research that is done by somebody else and not have an influence to that teaching. The moment we do a community engagement as a glue, it will also open an eye to the teaching to say, hey, you know what, I don't think this is the right thing that I'm doing. I must up a bit because the indicators 1, 2, 3 are showing that this is not a good module that I'm doing. So I think we should do it in that way. And then we also need to look at having an agreement or consensus on the appropriate tools that we use to measure. It means not only the universities, but also as CHE. We have got a bit of a, I'm not sure whether it's a challenge for the lack of a better word, when we have to do reporting on community engagement, and you find that it is quite quantitative and it becomes so worrisome. Because when you report community engagement, you don't want to report only on the number of projects, quantities, but you want to report on the impact, what shape, and the templates that they are designed, they do not allow us to do that. So we need to really work together so that we can make that influence. Agree on the standard methods that will incorporate the critical community perspectives, consistency. This is another problem.
Let me interfere, just round up, because they're asking you so many questions. I think people will have an opportunity to contact you. Otherwise, we are taking more of the next speaker's time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And then we can move to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Professor George Lange. Prof is a director of community engagement office. It's called Director Engagement Office at Nelson Mandela University. His bio is also on the prospectus. Prof, anyone who wants to go through it can go through it. And Prof, over to you now.
Good morning, colleagues. I'm going to take a slightly different slant to the two previous speakers, in the sense that if we are going to do monitoring and evaluation effectively, we also firstly need to look at ourselves and look at, are we not just paying lip service, or is our business, is our house in order before we actually do that? What needs to be in place within universities to effectively monitor and evaluate the impact or the effectiveness of what we are doing in terms of community engagement? And I've actually said what potential indicators can be used. So I've swung it around and say, let's look at the university, what needs to be there, to what extent are universities committed and serious about this role. And what I've done since 2003 to 2021, I've basically looked at what the milestones have been in the institutionalization process at the Nelson Mandela University. And based on that, I've looked at a national level, maybe at universities, and saying that if we go and monitor and evaluate a university's commitment or buy-in to the concept of community engagement, what are the indicators that could potentially be used? So I'm going to discuss a number of potential indicators that can be used for monitoring, and the proposed indicators may be used to determine the progress a university has made on its journey to becoming an engaged university. These indicators are based, as I said, on 18 years of documentation of specific milestones at my university, the Nelson Mandela University. And based on the documentation of this, there's been a few publications that have flowed from this, and this has been put into my repository, so if people want to go and have a look at that. Some of the universities in South Africa have moved much faster and much further in the process of institutionalizing community engagement, where others are still struggling. And I think I must say right up front is that most universities are struggling with the monitoring and evaluation. Before I go into the process, I think I wanted to find what I mean by institutionalization of community engagement. And I believe it's a successful diffusion of an idea and practice across the university, and it's moving it from the margins of the institution to its core. In other words, it's not considered a peripheral activity, but it's an add-on or a bolt-on activity. It's a scholarly activity that is ingrained in what you're doing. It's about how you teach and what you teach, what you research and how you research. And in the case of CE, institutionalization reveals a more complex portrait of organizational change. And you'll find in my presentation, you'll see what's happened over an 18-year period, how the organization has changed in terms of institutionalizing engagement as we go move along. And specifically since 2018, when the university was renamed to the Nelson Mandela University, you'll find that it includes a critical reflection not only on the institution's purpose, but also its values essential to the nature of engagement itself. So what I've done, looking at a 18-year period, it was a pre-merger period, a merger period, and a post-merger period. And I think I need to say right up front, the university that I was at right from the beginning, in my position as Director of Engagement, we were very fortunate in the sense that it was a very successful merger. And when you merge, you can re-look at everything and you can change things the way you want to change them, because we are not working from the basis of this is how it is and this is how we're going to keep on doing it because it's always worked. So there was the opportunity to re-look at how things are done and how we view certain things. And you'll find this whole process of moving towards an engaged university already started when Dr. Stumpf, who was then the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Port Elizabeth, he said that UPE was going to become an engaged institution. Then the mergers became introduced, and we found that he led the merger at the university. And even before the merger process started, we had a conference in Port Elizabeth that was sponsored by CEAD, with the title of The University and the City Towards an Engaged University for the Nelson Mandela Metropole. So already there, the impetus was set for this new institution as we moved forward with regards to institutionalizing engagement. If I just go one back. So what happened is that we documented the institutionalization process, and there were task teams that were put together. And I want to emphasize what is very important, that there's a clear understanding of what the university's engagement conceptual framework is, and its philosophy and its approach. Specifically, and it will change from university to university, either a research university, a comprehensive university, or traditional university. And I think with the approval of conceptual framework where everyone understands what it is, that conceptual framework and how you view engagement is then integrated and embedded into the core functions, policies, the KPIs, the recognition and reward systems of the university. So what my paper does, I'm saying, what are the indicators that you have institutionalized engagement that possibly will make it easier for you to do the monitoring evaluation of the effectiveness of your engagement projects that you get involved in, and then also with the establishment of an engagement office that would support it. Then we came to the post-merger phase, which is a very important phase, because we kept on, or I kept on documenting the whole institutionalization process of engagement. And we developed, the one was developing a university community engagement conceptual framework and typology, and then development of engagement management information system. I think that is very important. If you're going to monitor and evaluate, you need to have some form of centralized monitoring and recording system mechanism. And then after the first 10 years of the university being merged, we documented the first 10 years, and we produced 5 newspaper supplements. And in response to those supplements, we called on the public to comment on what the expectations were of an engaged university. The documenting process continued, and this is also to a certain extent monitoring and evaluating yourself. The Engaged University in the City, a case study that was done in 2017, and it was followed by another publication, The University and the Specificity of Place, the case of the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. So it was kept on looking at itself, the university. Were we really an engaged university that would be impactful? And then, as I mentioned, the name change that we underwent, and with the appointment of our new Vice-Chancellor, Professor Mutwa, and followed by the Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor CEAD, I think it's very important, and I will try and emphasize the importance of your senior leadership in this whole process. And then also, from 2018 onwards, we started with a repositioning of engagement process, where we said that the engagement that we do needs to be much more in service of society and not in service to society. So there was a change in emphasis on co-creation and conversions and sharing of knowledge and co-creating of knowledge. And then we went in the organizational redesign process, where we established an engagement and transformation portfolio. Now, the indices that I would say that we need to look at if we're going to go and monitor and evaluate a university and to go and see what should be present or what are the main drivers? What are the main enablers to be effective in this particular area? What are the indices? And one would go and have a look. So if you go and look at a national level and you look at all universities, what are the things that you need to go and look at? And those are the 15 that I've found in the documentation process and from the literature and based on my experience at the university. I will discuss most of them, but I have also clustered them together because we are a bit cramped for time. But I some of them are more important than others, but I do believe that by looking at an institution's vision, mission, and strategic plans, and the strategies that go with those plans and the goals that you want to achieve, is a very good indicator. And then also, as I mentioned, the leadership support, executive leadership support. Now, Indice 1, institutional vision and mission strategic plan, the integration of engagement into the vision and mission and strategic plans is a major enabler of institutionalization, because if you got it in your institutional plan, funding should be made available, infrastructure should be made available, and the necessary capacity development needs to be made available to drive that process to achieve those particular objectives, as well as a clear positioning of the engaged university. When you look at the vision and mission, you can say, okay, this university sees itself as an engaged university, and then also see embedded and a common theme in everything that the university does. I want to give you an example. We've just developed our Vision 2030, and I look at the documentation, and all the light-colored blocks, as well as the dark-colored blocks, give an indication of the university's thrust, or as an engaged university. It starts off in saying Nelson Mandela University is in the service of society, so that our knowledge contributes to co-creating a sustainable and socially just world. That is the value proposition that comes out, the value proposition that comes out of strategic plans and vision. And then it says that it engage with all publics in mutually beneficial partnerships that advance agency and promote the co-creation of African purpose solutions, and to foster more equal and just society. So when one goes and looks at this particular institution's vision and mission and plans, these are the themes that come out. This is where the university wants to go. I don't think we ever get to a position where we say that we are now fully engaged, but we are always in the process of moving in that direction or striving to become a fully engaged university. Also, executive leadership. I think there I just need to mention that the literature reveals that often if there's a change at the senior level, at the executive level, or the Vice-Chancellor level, new Vice-Chancellor coming in with new ideas could change existing processes that are in place. But you'll also find now within most universities, with engagement being positioned under a DVC, you find that is not happening to the extent that it previously did happen, because every Vice-Chancellor that comes in have their own vision and mission. And the importance of executive leadership in this process of taking the people along with them is very important. And I can just say from the perspective for those of you who listen to the presentations of Professor Butwa and Prof. Kiert, it would be very clear to you that the university, there is complete buy-in to becoming a fully engaged university. The positioning of engagement in the university is also very important, as is indicative of its value within the institution. And in terms of institutionalization, important aspects of support structure position is encompassed in the intentionality of the design and the link to the core academic work of teaching and learning and research. Because I think that is very important, because it's about what support structures are in place to do this particular, to engage effectively. The choice of placement in the institution is most successful when it has a specific rationale that is widely understood, and emphasis is placed on academic support and the development of engaged scholarship. And I think how the university conceptualizes engagement, that was brought up early on, and universities conceptualized engagement in a number of ways. But if you really go and have a look at all the universities' visions or the conceptualized of engagement, In most instances, it's only a differences in the nomenclature that's being used, because we engage through teaching and learning, research, and the provision of service. And it differs from university to university. As I said, there are some research universities, traditional universities, and comprehensive universities. So they all have different conceptual frameworks. But if there's buy-in to the conceptual framework and everyone understands the conceptual framework, it's going to make the monitoring and evaluation a little bit easier as well, because we're all talking the same language. Engagement, the university's engagement contextual framework should also be clearly reflected and integrated and embedded in its core functions. When I say that, you should see your conceptual framework in the policies, in the key performance areas of staff members, in its recognition and reward systems, the funding criteria, the monitoring and evaluation criteria, the governance structures, and the university structure. So that's the third indicator I need to move along. And then the university's approach, very important, is that it should be a scholarly approach, because when you apply scholarly monitoring and evaluation criteria from the university side, but in partnership with the community, because it's all about when you come together and you start with a particular project, what are you trying to achieve? What are the expected outcomes? And that needs to be done in partnership with a particular partner you're working with. And I want to emphasize the second point there, anchoring community engagement projects in scholarship that you see underpinned or built on the architecture of scholarship equals buy-in of academic staff, as it is aligned to their norms and values, promotion, recognition, and reward systems. And it equals to the sustainability of engagement, because often, if it just happens, it's just an add-on, in most instances, it's going to be difficult to sustain it. And then you need to have coordinative structures. Oh, that's a bit fast. For coordinative structures within the university. You have the office responsible for it, who drives the engagement. Normally a DVC, you have a centralized office that is responsible for academic support, coordination, monitoring, documenting. So when we're talking monitoring and evaluation at the institutional level, the engagement office will play a central role in that particular area. And further governance structures, we talk about research and engagement committees, faculty engagement committees, institutional forum, engagement forum, community of practice, hubs of convergence, entity, and program advisory boards. All of these governance structures, to a certain extent, contribute to the role of monitoring and evaluation within an institution, or what the university is doing, reporting on engagement, because a number of these reports will serve at these various committees. And then the importance of entities. You'll find that when you go and have a look at very extensively engaged universities, these universities have a large number of entities who engage with their various communities. Engaged universities have undergone structural adjustments and have shifted and flattened the hierarchical relationships between academics and external stakeholders. Examples of these include your various research and engagement entities, your industry chairs, and then recently with our university, we've established a hubs of convergence where we have community representation of the community and representatives of the universities working on specific issues. Entities serve as boundary spanners. They're porous and they're much more flexible structures and transactional spaces that are more responsive to the communities they serve. And they're also much more effective in levering funding. This is just an example of a number of entities. We have 47 in total. The ones with the stars of them are university funded. The others who don't have stars with them are self-funded. And I want to emphasize, these entities would not be able to exist if they don't engage. So one can see the importance of the engagement function in the establishment of entities. And then when we talk about engagement, we need to look at it in a holistic manner. Engagement does not just reside in the engagement office or in the office of a DVC. It happens all over the universities. It happens on a centralized basis. It happens at faculty level. At faculty level, it can happen, it can be department driven with your traditional departments. And then also at faculty level, it can be entity driven, where you have interdepartmental, transdisciplinary, and boundary spanning work taking place. And then as far as monitoring and evaluation goes, you have a centralized structure which which is centrally driven and coordinated. And we look there basically at the old memorandum of understanding, service level agreements that are signed off on, and the reporting of the university. So the emphasis is that everyone engages.
You have 3 minutes left, Prof.
Okay.
3 minutes.
Then I've clumped recognition, promotion, and reward. You need to integrate it into the recognition systems, the reward systems, and you need to provide capacity development. Just as in the case of teaching and learning research, professional development opportunities similar to teaching and learning research workshops, etc., are very important, because you need to look at the quality of that as well. One of the examples being engagement-focused writing retreats. Then you need to have community voice. You also need to have student voice. And very important is that the inclusion of the community voice can be an extraordinary indicator of an advanced university CE agenda, in that it suggests the development of trusted relationships. And as I mentioned earlier on, these community voices comes via engagement forums, communities of practice, hubs of convergence, program advisory committees, and entity advisory boards. They also serve a monitoring and evaluation function of the engagement activities of the university. So those are your governance structures or your oversight structures. And then internal and external funding, certain amount of funding needs to be made available internally through strategic advancement funds, and then also through engagement funding for projects over a period of 3 years, based on certain criteria linked to your mission, vision, and focus areas. And then if you take it seriously, then you should monitor it, you should record it, you should report on it. And I think it's very important that someone needs to be able to have or centralized office is there to actually to put all this information together, so that you're able to respond in a transdisciplinary manner, because most of the issues that we deal with, it is not one discipline will not lead to the solutions that we are looking for societal challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. We don't have more time. I don't think we'll be able to engage you on questions, but the presentation was really very good. You made us aware of the indicators, the importance of integrating this to strategy and to the governance structures of the university for us to be effective, recognized, get the respect that it deserves. And as I end this session, I think all of us learned a lot about community engagement. We needed more time to engage and discuss, and people were burning with questions. We have learned about using the logic model for monitoring and evaluating community engagements. We have learned about using the theory of change, also integrating the logic model, and the importance of integrating community engagement into the university strategy, so that it can have a buy-in from governance level to management level and to the lowest level of the university, and also how important it is, how it can even attract funding within the university. I think we are at the end of our session now. I want to thank the speakers. They did very well. It was really an eye-opening session. I want to thank the organizers. They made it possible for us to be here, and the support that we have had and through the WhatsApp. And I really thank you. Thank you.